I'm sharing with you here a tag album that I've made using Dusty Attic chipboard, and I am going to share a series of videos with you showing you exactly how I made these tags and how I decorated and coloured the chipboard items. So there'll be 4 videos in total because there's so many different techniques on each of these tags. Now these you could use these same techniques and these items for tags like I have on the cover of albums, or as embellishments on layouts or other off the page items. So I hope that you'll join me in each of these videos to see exactly what I've done. Thanks. This is the tag to be covered in this process video. Once again, I've sped up the process because it takes around 2 hours to make this tag. And obviously, nobody wants to look at 2 hours of footage, so I have managed to get it down to just over 20 minutes. I'm starting with another one of the mechanical sea items. This one is a very funky submarine with some interesting fins on it. And I painted a charcoal Prima metallic paint on as the base layer, and I am now painting a silver metallic paint on the second layer of the item. If you've seen my other tags, you'll know that these chipboard elements are a bit different because they have a number of layers to them to add dimension and interest, which also makes it quite easy to paint and put together, because you can paint each layer separately, which makes it much easier when you've got a lot of detail. You will see too that I used my craft knife to clean out the lines in this item. That's because if you put paint or wax or anything else too heavy on the item, you will get it in the engraved lines and you will lose the detail. So you need to not apply the coverage too heavily. You're better to go with small layers, many small layers, in order to colour the item without filling in the engraved lines. And I've just realised that it wasn't silver paint that I used on that second layer. It was actually a silver Prima wax. And for this third layer, I have added in a dark charcoal wax, and I have mixed the silver and the charcoal together to get a mid-grey. So I've ended up with a charcoal Prima metallic paint on the bottom layer, the Prima wax in silver on, I think it's called Old Silver, on the second layer, and then I have mixed together a charcoal wax and the silver wax to do the third layer so that it's a bit darker silver. Now I am using a permanent Sharpie pen, and I am colouring in the bolts or screws that are on that second layer of chipboard, so that you end up with being able to see the screws really clearly. This would be way too hard to do with a paintbrush. So by using a permanent marker pen, in my case, the Sharpie, you're able to get that very, very fine detail. And you generally have to go over it more than once in order to get it a dark enough black. But the black Sharpie will sit on top of the acrylic paint and will sit on top of wax. So that's not a problem. Like the Prima wax dries completely hard once it air dries, or you can heat it with a heat gun to dry it. And it's just like a painted finish when it dries. Now you can see here that I'm sticking the third layer of chipboard, which is the detail layer, onto that second layer of chipboard, and you can see the darker grey, which was the mix of the silver and a charcoal wax. The waxes blend together just like paint does, so they're a really versatile product, and they are excellent to use with chipboard as you get really good coverage without having to do any underpainting. And you can see there that by adding that second layer, we've ended up with the very fine detail over that base layer of the dark chipboard on the thin areas. And I think it looks fantastic. I am just using a pair of tweezers in order just to clear out excess glue, so I don't end up with glue drying bulky in the where the two elements have been joined together. And I've just got a little bit more of the dark grey charcoal wax that I'm lightly rubbing over because I want that third layer to be a little bit darker. So if you take care, you can do it while it's stuck together. I wouldn't recommend it. Much easier to do before you stick the elements together. In the close-ups, you'll probably see that I had a little burgee where I put the third layer wax a little bit onto the second layer. It's okay. But yes, much easier to do if you do it before they are stuck together. Now I'm just showing you here that I'm cutting out a tag. So I made my own tags out of just 12 by 12 sheets of chipboard. I used the one of the other tags to mark out this tag, and then I've just marked on the corners so that I can cut those corners off and get it nice and square, and all the tags will be exactly the same. So a really simple process to make yourself a tag. And I am going to clean my mat a bit. The wax comes off pretty easy with baby wipes. The acrylic paint, not so much. When it's dry, a good scrub will clean up the messy mat. But I am a very messy scrapbooker, so my messy mat is very messy. So now I'm going to colour all these mechanical pieces. So these are also all Dusty Attic chipboard. The details of what's been used will be included in the description box below if you want to know exactly what item numbers have been used. But Dusty Attic has a range of really cool industrial chipboard, which is great to use for male layouts. I use it a lot on layouts for my son. And now I am creating my own blue colour here by mixing a dark and a mid blue together. So that's giving me a rich blue base for these elements which are going into the background of my tag. Just like with all my other tags that I have made in this series, they've had these industrial elements behind the mechanical creature. And this time I'm going with this really beautiful, rich, deep blue. And I'm simply covering that all over the chipboard, and then I'm going to come back and add some more detail in a moment. Now, as I said, this wax dries quickly and it dries completely able to touch. So it's just like paint once it's dried. You can touch it, you can put extra layers over the top of it, and it dries very solid and clean to the touch. So although it's wet and tacky when you apply it, it doesn't stay like that. Now I'm using Tim Holtz Foundry Wax to do the light bulbs that are in these industrial pieces. Now Foundry Wax, when you heat it, it's sort of like a mixture between the Prima Wax and embossing powder basically, but it's in a liquid form, and when you heat it, it goes really metallic. So it really does look like metal. So I'm just heating that Foundry Wax at the moment there, and you'll see that it went very metallic, and I've got a little bit of silver wax there which I am lightly rubbing on other parts of the background chipboard. Now I'm just having a look, so I've put them there, had a look with the Submarine element, and I've decided that there's a bit too much silver, so I'm coming back with some more of the mid blue colour to add another layer on top of the waxes that are already there. Not touching the Foundry Wax part because I want that to be that really bright metallic silver because it's light bulbs, but I'm going back over the other elements to make it just a bit of a deeper blue. Fiddling around, making sure that they're all going to fit onto the tag nicely, that I'm happy with the colour behind the Submarine, which I am. And then what I'm going to do is colour all the other bits. So the spark plug I'm doing a little bit in blue, and then the balance of it I'm actually doing with the Foundry Wax. So I'm just putting Foundry Wax on that, and then I'm going to add more and more of Foundry Wax to all of the other little elements, because then when I heat them, they're all going to look metal. They'll tone in with the light bulbs that I've done on the bigger pieces, and they'll really pop off the background that I'm going to do for this particular tag. And they'll also blend and work really nicely with the elements on the Submarine, which have all been done in those silver and charcoal colours. So a tip with using foundry wax, if you have some, is that it will dry out if it's left exposed to air. So when you're using it, just put a small amount out at a time on your messy mat, because you'll see that the alcohol in it will evaporate and the wax will become hard and difficult to apply. So it needs to be used very quickly once it comes out of the bottle. So that's the foundry wax, has that problem, little bit at a time. The Prima wax will stay workable on your messy mat for a lot longer, and you can put it out, mix it up, and use it over time. It seems to dry quicker on the chipboard, probably because it absorbs into the chipboard, but with the foundry wax, don't put too much out at once, because otherwise it will dry out and you won't be able to apply it to anything, and it'll just be wasted, and it's not cheap. So you don't want to be wasting it. And also, before you use it, make sure you give the bottle a really good shake. You'll hear like little metal balls in the container of foundry wax, and you need to shake it until they're moving around well. So give it a really good shake before you start using it. If it's been sitting for a while, make sure you shake it till you hear the beads moving around. And you can see here that I'm just heating each of these bits. It doesn't take very long for the foundry wax to activate, just a bit of heat. And you can see how shiny that propeller is on those other elements with the light shining on it. So now I'm just looking at some paper of what I'm going to do on the background, and I decide that I'm going to go with pattern paper. And so this is old clothing patterns that I've picked up from our local tip shop. And I am just whacking it on, and I'm not trying to put it down neat or anything. I actually want to get some creases and stuff in it. I'm just using a soft gel to apply this, and the benefit, of course, too, if you've watched my other videos, you will know it seals the paper. So this paper would also be very porous, which would make it hard to work with mixed media over it if I didn't seal it. So the gel, when it dries, will make this a very workable surface for mixed media. And just hit it with a heat gun until it's dry, or you can put it aside to dry if you did it first and then worked on your chipboard. But I did this after my chipboard and I wanted to keep moving, so using a heat gun will dry it. Once it's fairly dry, I'm then going to use a sharp craft knife. You do need to be careful that your paper's not wet, because it will drag. And also, don't cut with a craft knife on your messy mat, because I've cut holes in my messy mats before doing that. So lift your messy mat up. Lucky I didn't cut a hole in this one. And you can tidy up the edges with an emery board. Emery boards are really great to have in your stash, and it will give you a nice neat edge then on your tag. And I'm grabbing out one of my favourite stencils here. I love this Starburst stencil. So it had some old texture paste dried in the design, so I'm just doing a bit of a clean up there. Much easier to clean it out before, while it's still wet, put it into water, then let it dry to have to scrape it out with a craft knife. And I am using Prima icing paste. You could use any texture paste you wanted. I decided I was going to use a silver texture paste. In the end, you don't see a lot of the silver, so I could have used anything. But this icing paste is fantastic. It will dry super duper fast. So clean up quickly. I cut that bit of the video out, but I assure you, you want to clean Prima icing paste up very quickly. Otherwise, it will dry on your stencil and you will never get it off. And now I'm just using a white paint, which I have sprayed a bit of water onto as well. And I've worked it round to help with the next layer that I'm going to put on, which I believe I'm using Distress inks and Distress Oxide inks to do this background. And the white will just help the blues that I have chosen to pop, because otherwise with a brown background, they would become more dull, so they wouldn't show as well. So putting a bit of white on it really gets it to show up. So this is an oxide ink. It is opaque. I'm putting some water on that to shift it around. And then I'm going to add some more distress inks to that. So just cleaning that up a bit. You know, you can add more on, mop it off. I'm hitting it with a heat gun so that it's not wet and runny when I put the next layer on. Otherwise, the two colours would mix together, which wouldn't be what I'm trying to achieve. I want some of the colour to mix together and some of it to stay separate. So now I'm just using an ink dauber, the right word's gone for me, but that's a Tim Holtz product that you can smudge the ink on around. And then I'm actually going to sprinkle over some water. So I'm topping it up, but I'm using my Tim Holtz Distress Spray bottle, which I love because you can either get a fine spray or by half pressing down the trigger, you can get bigger blops. Now you can see that the ink, the distress ink, is doing its thing. It's activating with the water and getting that splotchy effect over the top of the oxide ink. And I just love that effect. Now, if your tag or chipboard starts to bow, if you heat from the back, it will help reverse that. So I'm just putting another dark blue distress ink around the edge and smearing it a bit just so that it gets a bit more colour. So that's adding a bit of water into that and getting it to smear out. These inks are just fabulous. You can get so many great effects. It's really worth playing with it. And if you don't do art journaling can be a really good way to play with these inks and see what they can do. If you don't have a lot of confidence in playing with them, I suggest you watch some videos and probably have a play on stuff that you're not really wanting to have perfect so that you can see what they do. And so this is an oxide ink in a spray bottle, which I have just pulled the nozzle out and used the plastic straw part to flick dots of that oxide ink on. Now, because oxide is opaque and the distress ink is translucent, when you use distress inks, you'll be able to see oxide through them. But if you use oxide over other inks like distress or over another oxide, it will be opaque. So you will be able to see the oxide ink clearly. Now what I'm doing is just using a distress ink and a script stamp. So it's just any script stamp or any sort of background grungy type stamp you could use just to add another layer and another bit of texture to that background. A lot of it will be covered up by the Submarine and the other industrial chipboard pieces. And that is how that is going to start looking. And I'm just playing with some of the other little bits and pieces to make sure that everything's going to balance. And you can see how those silver elements that have been done with the foundry wax really pop off the other pieces. So I'm just fiddling around, having a play, and making sure that the composition is balanced, because although this is a small item, you still want the composition to be very balanced and pleasing to the eye. So you can see that most of it is diagonally across the tag. So you end up with a strong diagonal, and then I've put just a couple of little elements in that top left corner. Again, I'm using that strong Stamperia Fort glue. So it's an extra strong glue from Stamperia. It just will make sure that that chipboard is not going to shift at all. And I'm sticking down all of the elements, including all the extra little bits and pieces. And then I will stick down my Submarine. Now, I don't think I put any scrap chipboard under this because the Submarine actually overlaps quite a lot of the chipboard base, the chipboard industrial pieces, and they hold it in place quite well. If there was a big gap, I again would put a scrap piece of chipboard underneath the Submarine just to support it so that it's not going to come loose from the tag. Again, use a craft knife to clean up any extra glue that comes out under items, because you don't want bulges, even though it dries clear. I am using a little bit of off-cut chipboard there. That just makes sure that that Submarine is going to stick. So that's a really good tip. Don't throw out your chipboard because it'll be the same depth. Like, throw out your like the edges of your chipboards, because it's the same depth as all your chipboard pieces, so it works perfectly to fill in where you need that extra layer. Now I think I'm going to make a couple of little extra bits to go in that bottom corner just to balance out the top corner, because I put the 3 little cogs up there. So a little bit more foundry wax and dab it onto those cogs and heat them with the heat gun so they activate, and then just stick those on. So yes, as I was saying, keep your offcuts. So you can see there just on the left, there's the framework from the chipboard. If you keep that, you can use it to create layers in any of your projects, and it's exact same length as the other chipboard. And there is the next tag and 1 video to go. Thanks so much for joining me again. Here's your detailed photos so you can see all of the texture in the background, what the texture paste has done, and also the colours in that chipboard with the paint and the waxes and the foundry wax. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you join me again for my next video, which will be the 4th in this series and the final video in this particular series using Dusty Attic's Mechanical Creatures chipboard. Thank you.